Hello and welcome to this Second Nature webinar on leading the way global universities as living labs and agents of change for climate action and sustainability. My name is Alex Maxwell and I am the manager of cross-sector climate programs here at Second Nature. And before I start today's webinar by introducing our speakers, I'd just like to cover a couple of quick housekeeping items. First of which is just to make you aware this webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be shared with you via email, typically about a day after the webinar. So you could use that to watch the video again and of course share it with colleagues as well. For those of you that are joining us as attendees, however, you will be muted for the duration of the webinar, but we do encourage you to engage with our panelists via the questions window, where you can pose questions to our panelists over the course of the webinar. And we will look at those, collect those, curate those, and ask those of our panelists at the very end. Please note, you can also use the chat window on the GoToWebinar platform should you run into any issues during today's webinar. I have two other colleagues on the line, Devin and Andy, who if you use the chat window to let them know something's going on, they will be there to message you directly and hopefully get that issue resolved. But now, to introduce our panelist here, I'm excited to be joined by Dr. Julie Newman, who serves as the Director of Sustainability within the Office of the Executive Vice President and Treasurer, and also as a lecturer in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I'm also joined today by Dr. John Robinson, professor at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy and the School of the Environment, and also serves as the presidential advisor on the environment, climate change, and sustainability at the University of Toronto. Also have as a panelist today, Mr. John Madden, who's Director of Sustainability and Engineering within Campus and Community Planning at the University of British Columbia, and Mr. John Metras, who is the Associate Vice President for Facilities at the University of British Columbia. So now, without further delay, I'm going to hand things over to Dr. Newman, Dr. Julie Newman here, who will be talking about MIT as a campus as a test bed project. So Julie, I'm going to hand over the mouse controls to you now, and you can actually click to advance your own slides here. And if that doesn't work, just say next and we can do it for you.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you, Alex. All right, well, we'll check out if it works in a moment. I may just have you do the next button so we don't run into any more technical glitches as we go. Actually, why don't we just do that so then we're not fussing with anything, if that's okay with you. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to our colleagues at Second Nature for bringing us together for today's panel. And I deeply admire the work of my colleagues in Toronto and British Columbia and have for years, and just delighted to be part of this discussion with them in particular. I think we are all experiencing a moment in time that we never could have imagined. As we reimagine the future together, higher education will play an important role in informing our thinking and understanding of the future we seek to build and rebuild. It's become clear to me that we have immense responsibility in contributing to how we rebuild and reimagine our future and pay close attention to what continues to surface during these times. I know we're having some amazing discussions at MIT in this time. And as the Director of Sustainability at MIT, my team and I founded the Office of Sustainability to transform MIT into a powerful model to generate new and proven ways of responding to the unprecedented challenges of a changing planet. And it's this moment in time has really brought new meaning to the term unprecedented challenges. And one that I think we will continue to more deeply explore and understand, and I hope to do so with my colleagues who are on this panel today. So next, thank you, Alex. So MIT has embraced sustainable development and climate change as defining challenges for the world's citizen in the 21st century and for MIT. And at MIT, we have framed our commitment to sustainability as the need to promote health and well-being for a growing world population, while reducing our global footprint within Earth's capacity to sustain us. So for the purpose of today's panel, I will just be focusing on how we are leveraging the campus as a testbed to advance our work at MIT. Next slide, thanks. We launched the Office of Sustainability at MIT on a platform of considering the scales of impact of our sustainability work. And it's in the context of the role of the individual, the campus, the city, and the globe. From climate mitigation and resiliency to consumption, waste management, supply chains, and beyond. And this framework is what guides our thinking and our actions. So for example, when we design and evaluate our carbon mitigation efforts to achieve carbon neutrality, we explore what needs to take place at the level of the individual actor, on the campus, in collaboration with the city, integrated with the grid and considering our global impact. And we seek to understand interactions of economic systems, local to global, policy, infrastructure, technology, and behavior, to name a few of the dynamics. And of course, informed by the very best science coming out of all of our institutions. And we recognize that we cannot solve for sustainability within the walls of our campus alone, as we are completely integrated and reliant upon local, state, regional, and these global systems. So it is from this framework today to which I'm speaking to you, because underlying all of our work, we have to ask the question of what are we solving for? Next slide. And how are we going to solve for it? So the methodology that I share with you today is one of deep collaboration. And to me, this is what the future calls for. And this is part of my argument today, is we need collaborative leadership. We need deep collaborative leadership, and we need to be teaching our students about deep collaborative leadership as well. And in this case, it's between research and operations, and it's a commitment to robust data collection and analysis as a common thread. So on the left side, you'll see the way we engage is resource and course engagement. And the outcome, the more traditional outcome that we can enable is through research and publications, development or updated modeling, and of course, innovative solutions. And on the right side, thinking about operations and infrastructure, well, what do we need on that side? We need standards and guidelines for implementation. We need improved and accessible and robust data systems, and also innovative solutions. And so this is the platform by which all of our work for campus sustainability at MIT is grounded. So next slide. Next slide. So fueling this is a commitment to robust data collection and analysis. And so at MIT, we built a first of its kind sustainability data portal, which gives access to sustainability data to the whole MIT campus. Unfortunately, it's not available to those of you without MIT emails at this point. But this is an ever-expanding platform intended to streamline data access, track performance, inform decision makers, and catalyze research and teaching. And by centralizing campus sustainability information, the sustainability data pool enables the model I just shared with you. It enables the MIT community to leverage the campus as a test bed to generate new solutions to these global challenges, but at a local level. So it enables this information is available to researchers and faculty for teaching and research, and it's available to our decision makers for informing new kinds of decision making. So for today, I'm going to briefly introduce 4 ways to catalyze discussion with a panel in which we leverage the campus as a test bed, just focusing on current undertakings, not everything that's taking place today. All right, next slide. So the first is, this is the examples of data we have available to inform our thinking, from energy to water to materials to transportation, waste management, and LEED certifications as examples. Go ahead, next slide. So the 4 I'm going to share with you today include, this is perfect, operational transformation, a research innovation fund, course development, and campus demonstration sites. So to begin with, I'll start with 2 examples in operational transformation. I'm sure my colleagues have additional ones. So of course, in addition to mitigating our climate actions, which I'm not going to get into today, we have to be prepared for the uncertainty of a changing climate. So we're carefully analyzing future implications of a future climate, and we're taking the long-term view. So for the past 4 years, in partnership with a research group, the MIT Joint Program on Science and Policy of Global Change. We're working hand in hand with this research group and in collaborations with others on campus, planning, utilities, insurance, emergency management. This is the deep collaboration I'm talking about, to analyze the impact of a changing climate. And the team includes climate modelers, scientists, engineers, and the others I mentioned. It also includes engagement with the cities of Cambridge and Boston to help inform our flood vulnerability analysis. And you'll see here an example of our flood map. This will actually go public soon. And so this modeling enables us to look at flood exposure, small and large, chronic and episodic rain and storm surge events we ought to anticipate, and will inform the next phase of our consideration around stormwater and landscape ecology planning and management as well. Moreover, the data we've been collecting is now integrated with the city of Cambridge so that we can actually share and understand how is the city of Cambridge, which is on the outskirts of that dotted line, considering their climate resiliency planning, and what are we preparing for? Where are our hotspots, and what's going to be impacted with respect to research and teaching, to residential areas. So we have a new dashboard. This is just a snapshot of it. This is going to actually go public in a beta form next week to the MIT community. So stay tuned for that. Next slide. The second operational example is one of my favorites. It's on transportation. We recognize at MIT, and it's an amazing testbed example of how we move from place to place efficiently and responsibly is one of humankind's most enduring challenges. And this was pre-COVID. Now we're going to have to actually go back to the drawing board post-COVID. And in 2016, we launched a unique program by the name of Access MIT, designed to incentivize a flexible commuter choice for benefit eligible staff, faculty, and postdocs at MIT. So via an embedded Charlie chip in all of our MIT IDs, we enabled free access to local MBTA transportation, buses, subways, with also reduced parking rates in some commuter areas. It's in its fourth year, and it's served as an example for the entire Boston municipal area to redefine the culture of commuting and really encourage sustainable transportation practices. One may carpool to work with a neighbor, but then take the T home, or vice versa. So we carefully track the data for the purpose of research, teaching, and informing operations. And what we learned in a less than a 4-year period, we have fewer than 350 fewer people parking per day. And over that same period of time, over 2,000 more people per day were using the MBTA. So that's really informed our thinking of how to plan for, hopefully, reduce parking in the near future. So we're going to have to revisit this data. New partnerships have emerged, and we have new analytics taking place in order to inform a post-COVID period of time. All right, next slide. By the way, this dashboard, we just got permission, will also go live in December. The last piece linked to this that I wanted to share with you is that this has also become a phenomenal way to engage students, and this became a master's thesis. So using the baseline I shared with you, we then were able to work with a master's student who did a geospatial analysis of where all of our commuters were coming from, so we can now inform the next level of thinking and understand. And it turns out about 94% of the folks live within a 60-minute drive of the MIT campus. As many of our MIT employees that I've shared this with say, well, that depends on the traffic that day. But that is the whole point, is to help reduce congestion and to better understand that. And in a post-COVID environment, we see taking this data and actually intersecting it with HR policies. All right, next slide. The second example is we've had the great opportunity, next slide, a couple of years ago, a donor came through and enabled me to create a campus sustainability research innovation fund. So the takeaway here is about how to bring students, faculty, staff together to recognize that we are part of the challenge, that we have that we can look internally and recognize that we have these unbelievable sustainability challenges at our fingertips that can inform global thinking. And so since 2017, we distributed 6 grants that range from a water capture system on our central utility plant, which has since launched into a company by the name of Infinite Cooling. I encourage you to look up. We did an LCA of gloves. We're on we have a carbon neutral cooling system that was designed in a class that we funded that's actually also on the verge of launching a startup in this front. And more recently, we actually, coming out of this period that we're in, we brought a group of 3 totally different research specialties together to create a sustainable PPE study, into which we have one group looking at supply chain, another focused on life cycle, and another focused on disposal techniques to inform MIT's PPE procurement to disposal strategies over the next couple of years. So again, and the key here is that it enables a bridge, and it calls for a requirement to bridge faculty and student research with operational staff members on the ground. It's been a phenomenal experience. Next slide. The third example I want to share with you is how to develop course development. As I'm sure for those of you on the line, many of you have sustainability courses at all of your universities. We have many offered at MIT. Next slide. But for the purpose of today, I'm sharing 2 that I co-launched that were designed to leverage the campus purposely as a lab for teaching and learning and inform our thinking at MIT. So the first is called Solving for Carbon Neutrality. At MIT, we've run it for 2 years. We'll be running it again in the spring and considering it as solving for carbon neutrality at MIT and beyond. The second course we launched for the first time this fall. Next slide. Entitled Exploring Sustainability at Different Scales, and really exploring the scale model that I shared with you. And in both cases, a third of the course focuses on the campus and exposes the students to the underlying challenges we face at the local level. And equally remarkably, we get to integrate our incredible colleagues from operations who provide lectures and insight and design projects and enable the students to access data that is not only available on the sustainability data pool, but additional data we're also collecting to inform their thinking. And the partnerships that emerge from this way of teaching and learning are just incredible. And the insight provided by our own staff is outstanding and something you can't read in a book, to say the least. So I highly encourage this model. All right, next slide. I just want to add one more thing, is that in the case of solving for carbon neutrality, that's something we've been working on behind the scenes for a very long time, and the students' research really assisted in informing our own thinking on how to balance near and long-term reductions on and off campus. So you'll see more of their impact as we go public with a more aggressive greenhouse gas goal in the spring. Okay, and the last and final example I want to give is campus demonstration sites. Now, having been on the UBC campus, there are many more examples at UBC than I can share from MIT, but I do want to just highlight this as an important part of the equation. The one I'll share with you today, next slide, is there are others, but this is one of my favorites, is it's something called the Hive Garden. And it was designed by students hand in hand with our incredible grounds maintenance team. It was so fabulous to watch. The students even helped landscape and build the boxes here. But this is really an opportunity. The students were asking these questions around the impact of a changing climate, on plant life. And so what emerged from this was to design a garden that attracted pollinators and can be used to study the impact of a changing climate on a pollinator community. I just want to add, I had the remarkable opportunity to be in Colombia, South America last year, and visited a university in Cali, and they had the exact same garden designed by students in their grounds maintenance. So these are the kind of global connections and collaborations that can emerge. And the co-benefit of the design is that it's become a popular place for actually a mental health break to gather with friends, and has become quite popular during this time with the sparse environment and where people have to only interact outside. So I think you'll start seeing more of these in the MIT campus and beyond. So to close, we have to commit to educating the next generation of students to confront these complex global challenges. I would argue by leveraging the campus as a test bed for insight and problem solving. We also recognize that not only are we positioned to lead and accelerate the science and development of these strategies I shared with you today, but we must embrace our deep responsibility to understand how we on our campuses and at MIT are contributing to climate change and sustainability challenges. And it will help us to determine how do we take responsibility for our own impacts locally. So I'm coming to realize that the campus as a test bed framework really enables this discussion, in a new way. So We're positioned to leverage our own researchers, faculty, and students to get ahead of the curve by leveraging the campus as a test bed, by owning these challenges. It will enable us to better prepare for the future while working to reduce our overall environmental and human health impacts. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Alex, are you there?
Thank you, Julie. Thank you very much. I'm going to now hand it over to our next speaker, John Robinson from the University of Toronto. And John, just to let you know, we are still running into some technical difficulties with advancing the slides. So if you could kindly just say next when you need to advance your slides, I will help you along here.
Okay, will do, Alex. It's always such a pleasure to hear Julie speak on these issues and the incredible activities that she's leading at MIT. I think there's intriguing similarities that probably across all three presentations today, or four presentations across the three universities, and also some interesting differences perhaps that might form the basis of a bit of discussion. So I'm going to talk about what we're doing at U of T in terms of the living lab concept and the agent of change concept. And you see there a picture of the downtown campus of the university, one of three campuses. I like that picture because it shows how embedded we are in an urban fabric and with huge opportunity for collaboration with our city. Next slide. I want to begin with some contextual slides just to show you where we're coming from when we engage with Living Lab and Agent of Change issues. And one of the most important, I think, is this idea of a new social contract. It used to be enough for universities to teach and do research, the two missions that were held to be part of the social, whoa, can we go back? Held to be part of the social contract that universities had with society. We'll teach and do research and you give us money. That was the deal universities had. But more and more there's a demand, an increasing demand for universities to kind of step up and engage actively in real world problems, sometimes called the third mission. But the third mission has often been defined in very narrow technical and economic terms. I think we need to think of it as a much broader mission to really engage in solving societal problems, the sustainability problems of today. I think that's the context we're now in, and universities that see that opportunity and seize that opportunity are going to do really well. Next slide, please. This leads us to our version of what Julie was talking about, this idea of campus as a test bed. Universities have these characteristics that no other institution in society has, these four things together: of single owner occupiers of significant capital stock, a public mandate which allows us to take a longer term time horizon and accept a longer term payback than private sector organizations are able to do, teaching and research. We combine all of those things. Click, please, next slide. And so that allows us to turn our campus into this test bed where we can demonstrate solutions, we can study them, we can teach and learn, and really contribute to societal problem solving on sustainability issues. Next slide, please. The challenge that exists at most universities is an institutional culture challenge to being able to realize this campus as test bed. And I think of it as, next slide, please, as the difference between, and again, too many animations on this slide. The difference between the academic, no, back up, please. The difference between the academic world and the operational world, where the operational world is a sort of standard hierarchy where people actually have jobs with job descriptions and bosses and report upward, and the infinite plane of the faculty where nobody actually thinks they work for the university. Those are different worlds, and the reward systems are different, the time constants are different, but if you can find ways to integrate those, next slide, please, you create this explosion of energy. I've seen it at UBC, I've seen it at the University of Toronto, this amazing, innovative ferment that happens when you bring these two worlds together. Next slide, please. The other thing that we've adopted in our approach at U of T to this issue is an approach that says we're talking about sustainability in terms of both, next slide, both human well-being and environmental well-being. It's both sides of the coin. It's issues of social justice as much as endocrine disruptors. And it's also about trying to be net positive where that's possible. In other words, this isn't just about harm reduction and damage limitation. It's about trying to find forms of human activity that don't have to be minimized because they're damaging, but that actually simultaneously improve human well-being on the one hand and environmental circumstances and conditions on the other. Can't always find those options, but wherever possible, we should be looking for them. And the university has a crucial role in starting to unpack and identify and study and teach and learn about regenerative sustainability possibilities. Next slide, please. So that's the, and in that framework, we like the SDGs because they demonstrate very clearly that you can't sub-optimize on the environmental side of sustainability. You really have to do it all. All of these goals are dynamically interwoven with each other. None of them can be solved in isolation of the other. Next slide, please. So that's the context in which the President's Advisory Committee on the Environment, Climate Change, and Sustainability was born. In February 2017 is when we started operation. So it's been a little over 3 years. The mandate I have put up there just to emphasize that it is about research on the one hand, teaching on the other hand, and operations. It's the attempt to integrate across those three domains, exactly in the way Julie has described. Next slide, please. The committee, it's a committee structure. The interesting thing about having a committee is it's not threatening. It doesn't engage in budget or turf battles because it's just a committee. But it's crucial what the makeup is of that committee. 9 faculty, 4 senior staff ranging from the Office of the Vice President Research, the Office of the Provost, and the Office of the Vice President University Operations. And it's crucial to have those people represented. 9 faculty ranging across a very wide range of faculties across the university, 2 students, an undergraduate and a graduate student, and an alumna that represents our graduates. So it's a great group to work with. Next slide, please. And what we've identified is 3 areas of focus, but for today's presentation, I'm just going to focus, next slide, on 2 of those. The curriculum side is a whole other side. They all connect to each other, but I'm going to focus on the Campus as Living Lab and University as Agent of Change. Next slide. Under Campus as Living Lab, I just want to talk briefly about 5 programs we have going, quite different programs, and then we'll move on. Next slide. A crucial part of this is our operational carbon targets. We did a low carbon action plan last year, which resulted in a target of reducing our scope 1 and scope 2 emissions by 44,000 tons. We currently emit about 115,000, so 44,000 tons less by 2024. And that was followed by a utility master plan. So instead of looking at the individual projects, looking at the systems that bind it all together, and you can get much deeper reductions when you take a systems approach like that. And the current goal sitting in front of Governing Council waiting for approval is net zero by 2050 with an 80% absolute reduction and then 20% produced on campus renewable energy projects. So the idea is all of these offer the potential for significant Living Lab projects with students. For example, we're running a course this year where students are looking at the low carbon action plan and evaluating it and trying to analyze it in the context of what other universities and jurisdictions are doing. Next slide, please. So that gives us a pretty progressive context in which to study what U of T is doing. We thought we would just identify 6 Living Lab projects, 2 on each campus. UTSC is Scarborough, UTM is Mississauga, St. George is downtown. The picture I showed you earlier And the idea is one new build and one retrofit project on each campus, and that gave us 6. Next slide, please. However, what we discovered is a whole bunch of other projects going on where there were real living lab opportunities. So now we're overwhelmed with opportunities for doing living lab approaches. The constraint is more on the teaching and the student side at the moment. We have to manage the possibilities. Next slide. What we're doing is developing a set of living lab principles and concept document to make it clear what this actually animal is. Very similar to what has been done at UBC, to work with project planning teams and identify student opportunities. And we're starting to articulate the ways in which students can get involved that don't interfere with the budget or the schedule of the project, because that's obviously a concern that the operational staff have about their projects. They want to make sure they're on budget and on schedule. So we have to figure out ways to have involvement that maintain those goals. Next slide, please. We're also working really heavily and increasingly every day, it seems, on weaving the UN Sustainable Development Goals into our different activities. So our inventories, we have a bunch of inventories, mostly related to we have an inventory of all undergraduate courses at U of T, of all community engaged learning courses that have sustainability content, of all student clubs, of faculty research and faculty research funding, of master's theses and PhD theses. They're all being evaluated in terms of keywords derived from the SDGs. So the SDGs become a basis for creating the kind of database of what's currently going on. And just to give you a teaser on that, 25% of the 8,000 or so undergraduate courses offered at U of T each year, 25% of them, over 2,000, are connected to one or more of the SDGs. Who knew that? Nobody knew that because nobody had ever done the inventory before. So these inventories become really crucial. I'm just reiterating a point Julie was making about operational data and now applying it to the human dimension of who's doing what. We're part of the Times Higher Education Impact Ranking scores with big ambitions to improve there. As I said, we do this research and research funding inventory. We're running a 17 tables event where we're going to spend one day with 170 faculty sitting down at 17 tables for the 17 goals, coming up with ideas for new courses and new research projects in each of the 17 areas that U of T could adopt. And then the second day will be looking at cross-cutting themes across the 17, where organized in terms of 6 societal transformations and how we can think in an integrated way across the SDGs. We're exploring with the Vice President of Human Resources training for staff on the equity and diversity goals of SDGs and how that can be related to U of T's policies on HR, and with the Center for Research and Innovation support on workshops for faculty on how to engage with the SDGs in their research and teaching. Next slide, please. We did a report for the President on our Scope 3 business air travel emissions. As everybody knows, we're all required to report Scope 1 and 2, but there's no requirement for Scope 3 reporting, so everybody's doing it differently. So we thought we should find out what 3 things. First, next slide. First of all, what are they? Can we quantify our Scope 3 emissions? And we had a group of students in my Living Lab course who spent a term doing a bottom-up and a top-down approach to that. And the estimates range widely, but it's somewhere between 25 and 50% of our Scope 1 and 2 emissions, just in business air travel, to add on top of those Scope 1 and 2 emissions. So it's a substantial amount of emissions. Next slide. The second part of the project was on reducing business-related air travel. This was last fall, so we were excited about getting into virtual conferencing, and we did an actual conference, and we're doing an LCA of it, and tried to figure out ways to do that. Of course, then COVID happened, and everybody moved into this space, but still, we think we learned some useful things there. Next slide, please. And now we have a new program where we are going to tax all business travel in all the vice president's offices, in the president's office, and in all the dean's offices. So senior staff in all of those many offices are going to be taxed on their business air travel, and that those funds will be used for mitigation purposes, incremental mitigation purposes, things we wouldn't do without that funding available. So that's the report that went into the president. The tax has been approved, but of course isn't being levied now because no one's doing business air travel. So we'll start to take effect as that comes back. Next slide, please. I teach a course on the Campus Living Lab, like Julie, where students develop very, very applied sustainability projects for operational or academic administrative staff at the university. What I say to the practitioners that work with us, come up with a problem that's on your to-do list, but you're not going to get to this year because of bandwidth constraints. So the problems come from them, not from us, not from the academic side. And the students learn a lot about the real world constraints on actually making something happen on the ground. They're used to writing papers that solve the world's problems because they're fairly abstract, but now they learn about the barriers and constraints that happen in particular circumstances, in particular offices. We've done 24 projects since 2016. Next slide. And you get a little flavor of the ones this year. Communication strategy for our big geo-exchange project, biodigesters and organic waste in a residence. How do we communicate that to the students? Container garden, so it's intriguing overlap, Julie, with what you were talking about. Monitoring a new landmark building, a sustainability landmark it will be. So devising a monitoring system there. Should we be using the WELL standard to look at human well-being? Should U of T adopt that standard and make it mandatory? And then we're building a couple of mass timber buildings. And so we're looking at what are the challenges, acoustics, moisture, fire, and so on, that have been found so far in that field. Next slide, please. So that's Living Lab, and now moving to Agent of Change, we have 5 things there as well. So I'll quickly run through some of those. Next slide. We're very heavily focused on community engaged learning, experiential learning, ways for the students to get off campus and work with community groups or government agencies or companies on sustainability problems. So we did an inventory. There's about 150 of those courses now. 5,000 students a year are doing sustainability-oriented, community-engaged learning, experiential learning courses. Again, who knew? Nobody, because no one had done the inventory. Our goal was actually 5,000, but we realized it's been exceeded before we did anything, just because that's already going on. We're working quite a lot with the Center for Community Partnerships. We had a workshop of CEL instructors. What are the lessons they've learned? How can we expand? What are the barriers? And we're planning to have another workshop along those lines and develop a kind of community of practice on experiential learning. Next slide. We decided that we needed to communicate better with our own community because a lot of sustainability is under the ground or behind the wall or in the meeting room or in the classroom. It's not visible to anybody else, anybody not involved in those projects directly. So we've created something we call the Adams Sustainability Celebration with some donor funding. It's a 4-month-long series of events on everything sustainable that's going on campus. So we have sort of webinar type sessions. We have virtual booths that are open the whole 4 months. We have innovation prizes. We're giving out over $25,000 in prizes to students for sustainability, innovation ideas, and so on. And we have funding to do this for the next 3 years. And we're considering making it a 8-month-long continuous exposure kind of thing, but for now it's 4 months. Next slide. From the same source, we've created a category of Sustainability Championship interns. In 2019, 2 of the interns actually went to Utrecht University and to the University of Edinburgh to study what they're doing on sustainability, and came back and are working on a paper comparing those two to the University of Toronto. This last year, of course, we couldn't send anybody anywhere, but that meant we could actually hire more interns because we didn't have to pay transportation and living costs. And so we hired 7 interns who studied UBC, Arizona State, MIT, Sao Paulo, Cape Town, Hong Kong, and Monash University in Australia. And we're in the middle of writing up a paper comparing sustainability governance across these, altogether, these 10 universities. So I think this is a really useful thing to get students engaged in these kinds of projects and aim at publication in academic journals for undergraduate students, not all that common. Next slide, please. Involvement in international networks. I don't have to tell this group probably about UC3, the 22 research intensive North American universities looking at climate change solutions. And U7 Plus, it's about 45 or so universities, mostly in Europe, Asia, and Africa, actually. And these are opportunities to share good practice and to figure out what universities more generally can do as agents of change in their communities and collectively. Next slide, please. We run a sustainability boot camp with Sustainable Buildings Canada. It was a week-long session where graduate students from the 4 Toronto universities, U of T, York, Ryerson, and OCAD-U, all came together from many different disciplines and had a week of intensive training by industry professionals on sustainable building design, ranging from opaque wall assemblies to mechanical systems to indoor environmental quality to human well-being. They had professionals running these sessions for them. This was all free for these students. They got to interact across faculties, engineers with architects, with social scientists, with building science people, and so on. And then they ended up doing a modeling exercise. We used a U of T, an actual U of T building project as the case study. And then they got to watch a professional charrette on energy modeling that was aimed at this new building at U of T. This is really exciting, and we've agreed with Sustainable Buildings Canada to keep doing that. So we'll be doing it again next year. Next slide. The goal really of all this stuff is, a crucial way to make all of this stuff happen is to get it embedded deeply across the university. Next slide. And what we have here is an org chart. This shows the president's office at the top, all the vice president's offices below, and the dark green, these are all senior staff. These are all actual people on this chart. The dark green are members of my committee, of the President's Advisory Committee. The light green to the right, the far right, are 2 members of the subcommittees. But I want to point you to the blue. The blue are actual people we are working actively with on sustainability issues across all of the vice presidential portfolios. And I think this is crucial. We can't do it all in this little committee we have. We have to get it embedded throughout the university. Next slide. And so we have active relationships with all 9 vice presidential offices and 8 of U of T's 18 divisions, that's the faculties plus the 2 suburban campuses, of people who we're working with to enable them, not to do sustainability in their portfolio, but to enable them to support and foster and facilitate and encourage them to do sustainability in their existing mandate. And the final slide. Based on really a lot of discussion across about 20 universities around the world, we've come up with these 10 sustainability governance principles, which we think reflect the lessons learned across these 20 universities, that we learned across these 20 universities. I'm not going to go through them here, but I think this is something we should be thinking of doing across and between universities. What are the lessons? What works and what doesn't work? And so we're going to be trying to implement these principles ourselves and talking with our colleagues at other universities about whether they capture the way forward in making sustainability part of the core DNA of the university itself. Thanks very much.
Thanks, John Robinson. Now I have the pleasure of handing things over to John Metras. So John Metras and John Madden, actually from the University of British Columbia, you're welcome to turn on your cameras now. And John Robinson, you can mute yours and we'll get started. John Metras, please feel free to take it away.
Well, thanks very much. So it's appropriate that we're following John Robinson, who was a longtime leader and partner on the UBC Campus as a Living Lab program over many years, and it's great to see the work that John's doing now at the University of Toronto. I guess, John, you're helping us meet our knowledge transfer mandate in our program. In terms of the presentation, I'm just going to go through and provide an overview of the UBC Campus as a Living Lab program, including some of our significant projects. And then John Madden's going to take over and provide a review of some of the ways that we try to engage students in the program, as well as the benefits and key lessons learned from our program here, and some of the next steps that we're currently planning. You can see from the photo that UBC's in quite a beautiful West Coast environment on a peninsula about 8 kilometers from downtown Vancouver. We're really a small city on the point, and so responsible for our own planning, building operations, utility systems, and really an ideal location for using the campus as a test bed. We've had a formal Campus as a Living Lab program for 10 years now. And I guess when I say formal, I mean we have a committee now. Previously, though, we had many years of informal collaboration between UBC operations staff and faculty and students working to create a more sustainable campus. And this goes back well into the 90s when John Robinson first started at UBC with programs like Greening the Campus. So we do have a long history here of operational and academic collaboration. Next slide. So I'm just sharing some of the key elements of our program. The core idea is common across all campuses, really using the campus as a test bed or a sandbox to test new ideas and new technologies to address significant societal issues. That's really at the core of it. We've tried to enumerate here just some of the key elements, though, that we're looking for in Campus as a Living Lab projects. So that key integration of learning, research, innovation, and community engagement, which are really the mission of the university, with the campus operations and the campus community. And extending beyond the campus as well in terms of trying to forge partnerships with local technology firms, clean tech firms, with local government to partner on innovative projects that can use the campus as a test bed, but then allow us to transfer that knowledge to a wider context, addressing a range of different sustainability issues, so ecological, social, extending into health. We're really trying to look at a broad, as broad a scope as possible, although certainly issues like climate action tend to dominate in the projects that we've undertaken recently. One of the mantras at the beginning of our program from our VP Finance, who was very supportive of this, is that we needed to use our campus infrastructure in a financially sound way. And many of the projects that we've undertaken have actually resulted in cost savings. So there's been a financial benefit in addition to a sustainability benefit. And of course, the idea of acting, as John Robinson mentioned, as agents of change has always been quite integral to our program. And so this idea of knowledge transfer, taking what we learn locally and extending it out beyond the campus is important. So I'm just going to share with you 3 significant projects that we've undertaken over the last 10 years. If we can go to the next slide, we'll start with a project that was, again, led by John Robinson. This is the Center for Interactive Research on Sustainability. An extreme green building, at least in 2010 when we were starting construction of this project. We incorporated into this building a wide range of really leading edge sustainable building technologies. So Everything ranging from solar thermal heating, ground source heat pump, solar PV, water reuse, green roof, wood structure, on-site wastewater treatment, as well as heat exchange with an adjacent lab building. So an incredible range of different systems and technologies used in the building, some of which were challenging to commission and get up running. And this was really all part of the Living Lab concept, is that, we knew that, we were really at the leading edge at the time, and some things would work well and some things would need to be optimized over time. And that really provided an opportunity for researchers and for students to become engaged with the building as a lab. We had grad students that went through and really helped, commission the building. They identified problems, fixed those problems, optimized systems, and in the process, wrote theses and earned degrees through this building. And I think we need to go, John Madden, and look at the numbers of students that have actually gained their degree in part through their work on this building. And as you can see, we had a range of partners in the project, BC Hydro, Interface, Honeywell, Haworth, to name a few, who were, provided some of the technologies that were included in the building. And so we've done, as I said, a wide range of research, including human behavior research in terms of how the occupants interact with the building and the building systems. So a very interesting project. Next slide. The next project that we undertook was the Bioenergy Research and Demonstration Facility in partnership with a local clean tech firm, Nextera, who were really looking to demonstrate a new biomass gasification technology. And we were able to develop this facility, which is a significant scale in terms of providing about a quarter of the base heating load for the campus, using biomass wood waste, essentially, from local furniture manufacturers, local landscaping, municipal landscaping operations, to provide the clean fuel source for this facility. And so this has allowed us to have a significant benefit in terms of GHG reduction. There is a cost savings longer term in terms of lower cost energy production. And it's provided a platform for a wide range of research, particularly with our Faculty of Applied Science, looking at the fuel source, the process, emissions, and materials. And so it's been quite an effective project in terms of integrating leading edge research, but with a practical operational benefit to the campus in the long term. And it's helped contribute to our ability to reduce GHG emissions. We were able to get to about a 38% reduction over 2007 levels last year. We currently have this plant shut down as we expand it. So we've had a little drop in our emission reduction because we've had to switch over to our natural gas energy center. But next year we'll have this facility expanded and providing about 2/3 of the campus heating load. I think it'll provide heat for about 9 months of the year, with a peaking plant for the other months, providing the rest of the heating source. So this has been a practical project for us. Moving to the next slide, switching gears a little bit, sustainable building materials. So this is our Brock Commons tall wood house. At the time we completed it in 2017, it was the tallest hybrid mass timber building in the world. We utilized cross-laminated timber floor plates, glulam columns in the structure of the building, in terms of embodying carbon benefit that you can see there, to 2,400 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. The project also offered a range of research opportunities for our Faculty of Applied Science. We looked at everything to do with the project development process here, which was quite unique, and then the life cycle performance of the wood structure over time. And all of this has been done, again, in partnership with external groups from Natural Resources Canada, Binational Softwood Lumber Council, as well as contribution from the province of British Columbia. So this has been quite a unique project for us, and it's gotten quite a bit of attention around the world. And we're developing other projects using mass timber, and you can see U of T is doing the same thing. And so there's a real focus on utilization of this sustainable, locally sourced building material. Moving to the next slide, we do a range of smaller projects which utilize a fund that we set up 10 years ago. $200,000 a year is allocated to different projects across campus involving UBC researchers, students, addressing operational problems all across the campus. We're looking at a whole range of different issues with these projects, from biodiversity, looking at bioproducts, transportation. We've got a program that's collecting data from various sources around campus, hopefully to create a fabulous dashboard like the MIT group have. Really enjoyed that, Julie. We've worked on more green building projects. We have a passive house student residence at our Okanagan campus in Kelowna, BC, and then working as well on water conservation projects on the Vancouver campus. So, you know, all of these projects collectively, you know, are allowing us to really build that engagement between the UBC operations team, researchers and students, as well as the external community. And so I'm going to pass it over to John right now. We'll talk a little bit more about how we're specifically engaging students in our program, and talk a little bit more about the benefits of the overall Campus as a Living Lab program here at UBC. John.
Great, thanks, John. Yeah, I think John presented a real nice overview of some of the signature projects that have been really transformative in terms of advancing green buildings and advancing towards our very aggressive climate action goals. Flip to the next slide, Alex, and I'm just going to go over, you know, one of the offshoots of the Campus as a Living Lab program is what's called the SEEDS Sustainability Program. And, you know, this has been really transformative in terms of creating a platform for applied research and interdisciplinary partnerships between students, faculty, staff, and community partners to advance sustainability ideas, innovative policies, innovative public realm installation projects that also help to animate and inform our campus community. The program essentially works by having an operational staff member identify and formulate a policy problem or question that needs to be addressed. The staff then formulates this proposal call that is targeted to students in relevant faculties. And the successful students work with staff and the client to outline the scope and the project timeline and deliverables. The student or student groups are guided by faculty to produce a research report, present findings to the client. And the SEEDS projects range from, you know, large interdisciplinary groups in student collaborations between different departments and faculties. And they've really helped to inform a wide range of projects. One example is a group of engineering and planning students work together to inform our rapid transit route planning to campus. We've worked with our urban forest program to undertake tree inventories and assess the ecosystem services and production of our natural and tree assets across our campus. So the SEEDS program really provides us with an innovative student research with a wide variety of perspectives. It presents the students with real world challenges and experiences while also helping to advance our sustainability policies and well-being across the university. So there's real benefits and values for all the partners within the SEEDS program that participate. Next slide, Alex. So just to talk a little bit about the benefits of the Campus as a Living Lab program, it really does leverage the campus university assets, our buildings, the infrastructure, the public realm, the natural assets as the apparatus for teaching, learning, and research. It also provides a platform for innovative infrastructure and solutions. The Campus as a Living Lab has given us the opportunity to make significant investments in high performance buildings. It provides a platform for clean energy supply that John Metras had spoke to with the bioenergy facility. And it really helps to create this co-production of knowledge, not only for the benefit of the researchers and the students, but also for faculty and for staff that are really trying to advance policy in these innovative areas. So the Campus as a Living Lab provides a medium for knowledge transfer, such as piloting innovative approaches to advancing, for example, the provincial energy step code, when we develop net zero buildings and passive house projects that were referred to in the previous slides. And we use these projects as a basis for monitoring and research to really understand the efficacy and impacts of these programs. The CLL has spawned a fertile ground of innovation that attracts thousands of visitors that tour our campus each year to view these Campus as a Living Lab projects. And UBC has become a magnet for government officials, industry, and technology partners, as well as researchers and professionals to learn and to spark inspiration and motivation for staff. As public research institutions, our role is to really disseminate those learnings beyond the institutional boundaries of our campus. Next slide, please. So some of the key success factors of the program rest largely in the strong culture of collaboration between operational staff, faculty, and researchers that see the mutual benefits from the program. Champions like John Robinson and John Metras that have been really instrumental in stewarding the program. But just the large, wide range of participation of faculty and staff in the program, really realizing the benefits that are accrued to the projects. So UBC's been blessed with some very committed partners, including government, utilities, technology providers, and industry. UBC's had a strong legacy of sustainability champions that have really galvanized UBC as a place to invest, and a place that is willing to take risk in our efforts to address some of the most pressing issues and challenges of our day, like climate change and the biodiversity crisis. The CLL program offers seeds funding that often gets matched with in-kind and external third-party funding contributions that create significant value for all the partners involved. The CLL program also brings resources for program coordination, facilitation, network development, communications, and branding. And at the outset of each of the projects, we really formulate what are the kind of studies and monitoring that we can do in partnership with faculty and postdocs and students to really assess the efficacy and impact of the project that can be widely disseminated to inform not only policy on our campus, but beyond the boundaries. I think our purpose and our role as an institution is to actually help be that agent of change that John Robinson referred to. So we really see the success and the failures instrumental to helping to advance innovation and sustainability. And next slide, please. So just to end off here, this year, under the leadership of John Metras and the CLL Steering Committee, the CLL program is being renewed to better align to UBC's strategic focus areas, including climate action, health and well-being, green buildings. And in addition to extending the applied learning opportunities for students through the SEEDS program that I mentioned before and the Scholars program, we have added a program manager, which has been really effective in expanding the reach and scope of the projects. Additional resources have also supported greater faculty engagement and developing more interdisciplinary collaboration and strategic partnerships on and off campus. We are currently piloting a $200,000 competitive call for proposals. We're right in the midst of doing the evaluations right now, where we're going to seek to fund 3, maybe up to 6 projects in 2021 that really helps to support those sustainability priorities that I mentioned. So that concludes my presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Alex now to start with the questions and discussion.
Great, John Madden and John Metras, thank you for your presentations, and I'd welcome all of our panelists at this time to turn on your webcams. We had several questions come in. This was a very rich discussion, very great presentations here, and a lot of you touched on this subject or this challenge of integrating operations with the academic side of the house, but also mentioned the numerous opportunities and benefits that come through doing so. For those that are maybe just entering into this idea of using maybe campus as a living lab and really trying to overcome any potential hurdles in integrating those two sides of campus, could you offer up some of your how-tos or specific strategies for how you approached integrating those? I know, thinking back to your comments, John Robinson, you mentioned maybe making this ask of come to us with your problems, but I'd be curious for all of our panelists, any kind of pro tips you might have for making that or for creating that initial discussion between those two sides of the house, if you will, at the university. I'll pitch this to maybe Julie first, and then John Robinson, and then John Madden and John Metras. You can answer.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is yesterday I had the opportunity in the class that I was teaching. We invited this amazing colleague from Stanford, Pam Matson, joined us, who used a term I wasn't familiar with that I think John's familiar with her work called boundary spanning. I'm going to look a little bit more into it, but she really described so much of what the role of the sustainability officer is, which is that's our role. It's to bridge academics and operations. And so I think, so much of what we all shared today, I think it's building trust. I mean, you can't just arrive and all of a sudden assume that those bridges are built. But I think the examples that we all provided for you provide the space and the place where you have to bring different kinds of decision makers, different kinds of expertise together, and provide them this, what would you call it, John's the space and the opportunity to, on the operational side, to contribute to a problem that needs to be solved, and also identify the problems, and equally demonstrate the value proposition, the knowledge base that exists within our remarkable institutions, and really highlight that to the faculty research side. What I have found in the couple of universities I've worked in, it doesn't take but a couple of examples to demonstrate the value proposition of that relationship. Go ahead, John Robinson. I can't.
You're on mute.
There you go. Uh-oh.
John, I think you're still on mute here. There you go.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just following up on what Julie said, I think the whole boundary object literature is really relevant, and the sustainability object offices are in fact such boundary objects. And at UBC, there was the UBC Sustainability Initiative, and it served that role of reaching out across both worlds. In my case at U of T, my committee, as I showed you, had faculty and senior administrative and operational staff on it. I think we're still the only committee of the university, ongoing committee, that has that kind of cross-fertilization built right into the structure. But that's crucial. There has to be a place where this happens. It's not going to just spontaneously emerge necessarily. So somebody has to have it as part of their day job to really, start the process. And as Julie says, demonstrate the value so that, others see it and want to become part of the process. So it can be the sustainability office, it can be another institutional arrangement, but somebody has to take it on to start to create it. But I can testify both at UBC and at U of T, this unbelievable wave of energy and enthusiasm and innovation and excitement that happens. I think, Julie, you've found exactly the same thing. When you bring these two worlds together and say, hey, why don't we try this? And so you need something to make it happen, but once it happens, it becomes
so rewarding.
Self-generating, and rewarding.
Yeah.
Yep, those are very good comments, and I'll just sort of jump in on that and maybe add to it a little bit. You know, for those folks that are just embarking on it, often there's a bit of inertia. There's some hesitancy, perhaps, on the operations side. I know that you know, often the operations folks don't want people messing with their buildings and systems, and that's a you know a challenge. But having that catalyst in the sustainability office, and I think, you know, as a sustainability office leader, it's really looking for the champions, and they're everywhere. Everyone is interested in how we can, you know, become more sustainable and effective with our operations. And, you know, that problem solving aspect is something that's really key for operations staff. We've got a lot of problems that we need to solve. And one of the, you know, one of the aspects of this is the university. I know that at UBC, we really benefited from the fact that the university set big goals around GHG reduction. In 2010, we set very ambitious goals, and it really became an operational problem that we had to solve. And, you know, but we really need to solve it together as a campus community. And we recognize the immense expertise we have on campus. And so, you know, as a you know, someone who's running the facilities, we recognize that you know, we needed everybody on board to make it work. Now, one of the things, I guess, from you know, facilities leaders' perspective is, how do you mitigate risk? And so we've really looked at that, you know, as we've implemented leading edge technologies across campus. We've really looked at how in each project, what's the off ramp? What if the technology doesn't work? What's plan B? And in all of the projects that we've developed, there's been a plan B. For example, in our bioenergy facility, which involved biomass gasification, originally we were taking part of the syngas generated through that process and putting it through a diesel engine, a GE Genbacher engine, to generate electricity. So it was a cogen plant. But we couldn't, you know, the big research question was, could you clean the tars out of that syngas? And they couldn't figure out how to do it to the point that they could actually run it through the engine properly, and the engine just ended up gumming up with tars, and it didn't work. So we were able, though, to quickly kind of switch gears and connect that generator with renewable natural gas. So we're still producing electricity as we wanted to and had planned to. We're just doing it another way. So that's sort of an example, a practical example of how you deal with risk mitigation on these projects.
And just to build too on that is, from the operational perspective, we're really always challenged by budgets and constrained resources. And the value proposition that Julie and John referred to is really that we can utilize the competitive advantage of what universities do, which is knowledge production, right? And we use, I don't use consultants very often. We utilize and leverage the role of students and faculty, researchers and thought leaders to really help inform some of the biggest challenges that we have on campus. And to John's point, it's mitigating risk, but some of these things are actually trying to push the boundaries. And there's inherent risk in that, but we kind of look at projects where we do have the ability to expose ourselves to more risk. I come from the municipal government experience, and the risk mitigation is so much higher at a municipal government level. That's our role as universities, is really to really push through these boundaries, to take that risk, to innovate, and to actually be that agent of change that John's speaking to. So I see that opportunity exists in terms of capitalizing on the knowledge production of universities. I think the benefit for students in particular is that when students have that applied learning experience, their competitiveness in the job market after they graduate is so much better, that they have that kind of, not just the theoretical underpinnings, but the real world experience of problem solving, working within an interdisciplinary office environment. And that's really hugely beneficial for the students.
That's great. Well, thank you for your responses there. I think there's a lot to be gleaned from that in terms of the boundary spanning opportunities, the value propositions, and the benefits of involving students. On kind of a similar note, you've mentioned a couple of initiatives. I know, Julie, the Sustainability Innovation Fund. Others have mentioned hiring students as interns. There are maybe some of these areas that do require maybe just a bit of seed funding or funding to prop up kind of a larger, maybe even more innovative effort on campus, beyond what you might be able to achieve in not hiring consultants, but maybe leveraging the other assets you have on campus. Could anyone on this panel maybe speak to where you've seen the need for funding and access to additional resources to really achieve the things you wanted to with either your campus as a living lab efforts, or even more broadly with sort of agents of change in the community efforts? And maybe I'll send this to John Robinson first, and maybe we'll kind of work in a different order. Maybe John Robinson, John Madden, John Metras, and then Julie, if we could close with your comments on that. But John Robinson, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think there is a seed money kind of role, especially for getting things going. The best example I know is actually a UBC example, where we had $50,000 a year to hire student interns to work with the city of Vancouver on sustainability problems after 4 years, in which they'd hired 8 of those students. They came back and said, we want to double it. We got so much demand inside the city for these projects that we want to do 20 students a year. And we said, we don't have any money for the extra 10. They said, no, we'll pay. So by having the seed money to start the program and fund it for 4 years, it demonstrated enough value that the city was paid for 9 the following year. And now I think it's up to about 65 with a bunch of different partners in the community. So this is a really powerful role that initial seed money can play. Show value, because if you just go to someone and say, oh, this will be really good, you'll love it and it'll help you out, they may or may not believe you. But if you can fund it for a few years and demonstrate that value, I think the chances of getting continuous funding are much greater, and the partnerships learn how to work together in those processes. So we're doing that with a bunch of our plans for internships. But the other thing to say about this is it's not just about dollars. It can also be about academic credit. You can pay students in 2 ways. You can give them money and pay for their time, or you can give them academic credit for the work they do through courses and theses. So that's another whole route. And the Living Lab projects that we all talked about today are more based on the academic credit route than the paid labor route. And so that's a really important thing, because it doesn't require dollars. It requires faculty willing to supervise the work in their courses. So that's a different process of recruitment of faculty. And that, I mean, my most simple rule about all this stuff, Living Lab stuff, is lead with students. Always lead with students. Never lead with faculty. We can lead with staff sometimes, but don't lead with faculty. Lead with students. And that's more interesting to our partners than anybody else. And they're more engaged, they're more enthusiastic. So build around student engagement.
That's great, John Robinson. I will say I might shuffle up the order, recognizing, Julie, I know you have a hard stop at 2:30. So John Madden, do you mind if I kindly slip in Julie's comments here before yours, just to make sure we get those in before you have to head off? But Julie, please take it away.
I think just to add, thank you, Johns. I guess maybe just 2 comments I was thinking as John was talking. One is just, I think, and where we've all connected is I think it's so essential for sustainability directors, officers to have a very entrepreneurial mindset when you step into an institution. So one is not thinking, oh, that's the only budget I have. I see it as, okay, where am I starting with? and where can I leverage funds all across the Institute. So that has been my approach all along. So to John's point, you know, I've always figured out how to develop a budget that includes some student fellowships, if you will. I didn't include that in today's talk with, you know, with limited time, but that's been an essential ingredient to the launch of our office. Agreed. But the key there is that I haven't paid for all of them. I've found partners to say, so with climate modeling, that's been a shared position with our emergency management group right from the get-go. So we could say, if we're going to have a prepared campus, if we're going to prepare for a changing climate in the future, we need to absolutely do this in partnership with emergency management. So that's a great example. We were able to raise our part of the funds, they raised their part of the funds, and that was joint from all along. I have lots of examples on that front. And similar with research projects, I have some new research projects going where I've been able to take some money out of my general fund and find research partners all across the Institute to do shared funding. So that applies to pretty much many of the examples I shared with you today, from the hive to climate modeling. So that's number one, is be entrepreneurial at all times, all of the time. The other one is, again, I was fortunate enough to have somebody following our work and came through and said, I'm particularly interested in your scales of impact and the way you're thinking about campus to marketplace, or campus, you know, lab to marketplace, et cetera. And they came through with a seed fund. And what that did is, back to, I guess, the first question, it did, and again, I recognize the privilege involved in receiving those funds, and acknowledge that, but that enabled me to test out a model and to actually, back to the points of reduce the risk of what it means to bring faculty and students and staff together to identify and solve problems. So in that case, seed funding was essential. That funding is now gone as of this month, so I am looking for more funding, and starting on down that path right now. And the last piece is, I've actually applied for funding. So the first course that I launched, I actually applied for in the spirit of entrepreneurship with the class that I taught on carbon neutrality. That was our foray into co-developing classes with faculty. We co-developed a grant. We applied for seed fund for new coursework on campus, got the seed funding, enabling us to hire a TA. So again, that's the other way I encourage people to find funds too. So those were my three responses, but these are great questions people are asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. John Madden or John Metras, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, Julie covered a lot. I totally agree. Is you got to be entrepreneurial. I think the other dimension is look for the mutual interests across different entities. We've done some really interesting partnership programs where, again, under really super constrained funding, we partnered with BC Hydro and the provincial government to contribute funding to a number of studies around climate adaptation and thermal comfort. And that's been really instrumental in modeling what the impacts of climate change is going to be. Understanding that the campus has a whole variety of different typologies of buildings that are being built in other areas in the province and across municipalities, that we can actually apply the learnings from that in terms of advancing provincial energy step code examples. How do we really support new dimensions around climate adaptive buildings and climate responsive buildings? And so these have been really instrumental in terms of finding the mutual interests that not only serves the interest of UBC, but can be actually disseminated to our partners.
Thanks, John Madden. I know I'll get John Metras in here as well. I know Julie has to hop off. I just want to say a thank you to Julie. Again, we'll stay on for another question here because I know we started late, but just a quick thank you to Julie for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Good
to see everybody. Thank you all. Thanks for the excellent questions, and Toronto and UBC will follow up soon. And thank you again, Alex. I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
John Metras, anything else to contribute in that question around sort of where there may be needs for funding, or where you may have to get entrepreneurial, if you will?
Yeah, well, there are definitely needs for program coordination funding. I mean, one of the lessons that we've learned from our Living Lab program which was really run off the side of my desk and John Robinson's desk and John Madden's desk and others for many years, is that having dedicated, program management is really important to really get the full scope of potential benefit. And so being entrepreneurial, Julie hit it on the head. I mean, the first years of our sustainability office at UBC, that office was funded from energy cost savings. And so that type of, ability to go and generate savings to produce, to allow you to fund the program is really key. And then looking at external sources, John Madden had mentioned BC Hydro. They've actually funded energy manager positions or parts of those positions, which has been really valuable for us. And so there's clear benefit to BC Hydro around demand side management. And so we've benefited from that external support as well.
Great. Well, thank you. And I know we actually have several more questions coming in, and I apologize to our audience that we won't be able to get to them all. I'll slip in one more before we sign off, recognizing that we started a little late here. I guess this question is more so directed at you, John Robinson, but maybe I can ask it in a way that we can open it up more broadly. So you mentioned your starting point with a lot of your efforts in taking an inventory on what existed as far as community engaged learning and the classes that were on offer related to sustainability and climate action. Can you maybe speak to, one, the importance of that inventory as an initial step, and then two, what was more specifically the process for collecting that information? And John Madden and John Metras, if you can speak to kind of the importance of knowing what's going on and having this inventory of existing activities as maybe a place to build upon, that would be great as well. But John Robinson, your thoughts?
Yeah, I believe this is crucial, and we're doing and trying to maintain 5 different inventories of courses, of community engaged learning courses that have sustainability content, of research, published research, of research funding, and of student groups. Oh, sorry, I guess 6. And then theses. How many dissertations and how many master's theses address sustainability issues? By the way, it's 20% of each at U of T. So these become, we did this entirely with students. I had a group of 5 undergraduate students called the Extended Student Engagement Group, and I cobbled together little bits of funding to pay for them as RAs in the spirit of Julie's entrepreneurship. And they did the inventories. And basically what they did is they took the SDGs, derived keywords for each SDG, and then searched the online databases of courses or of research funding or whatever it is to come up with an initial inventory. But you have to ground truth it because some of the keywords have multiple meanings, and the term production, for example, doesn't necessarily mean what sustainable production and consumption means in a course outline. So you have to go through and do that. But once you've got that initial database, then you're really only dealing with what drops off and gets added. So it becomes a much smaller job to keep it updated over time. Then you know all the faculty teaching those courses. So that becomes your audience for a community of practice, for example, and so on. So it can be done by students. And I'll just mention one thing. The students who did the course inventory, I encouraged them to submit a paper to the ISCN conference, which was in Stockholm that year. It was accepted. I found some money, sent all 5 of them to Stockholm. They presented at an international scholarly conference. They came home. I encouraged them to write it up in a paper and worked with them. We submitted the paper. It was published in a refereed journal. And then out of the blue in August of that year, it won a paper award from the other big association, ASHE. So here's 5 undergraduate students getting a refereed journal publication, a conference presentation, and a paper award. We don't usually think of our undergraduates as doing that kind of work, but I think we should be pushing hard to engage students in all these activities and try and turn them into products that they can add to their resume. So I'm a big fan of inventories.
Thanks, John. John Madden or John Metras, anything else to add there?
Well, maybe just citing the examples of the Scholars Program and the SEEDS program, I think really two exemplary programs that demonstrate the importance of the inventory. So not only the inventory of research, but I think through the SEEDS program, there's been over 9,000 students that have participated in the development of research reports and projects and initiatives. We categorize those based on kind of thematic areas. So that becomes kind of, and that's publicly accessible too. So same with the scholars reports. These reports become in the public domain, accessible to anyone that wants to kind of capitalize and learn from that research findings. I think the other dimension to it is we're beginning to curate the programs a lot more based on the kind of needs assessment and priorities that we're facing from society. And two of the kind of key crises that we're kind of focusing and curating our programs around is obviously climate change, but also the biodiversity crisis and the intersection between those two. And obviously the connection between health and well-being. And so the SEEDS program has really kind of curated and refashioned itself to focus on those kind of three core priorities, so that one, we're answering kind of the demand-driven research needs, not only for our campus, but our community partners. And we're answering some of the kind of pressing issues and problems of today.
Thanks. I think John's covered it. Or you can keep.
Well, that's great. Well, I know we're a little over time, and we certainly have many takeaways from just recently speaking about the importance of having an inventory, of having a lay of the land, the importance of being entrepreneurial, demonstrating value as a way to build out scale, leading, and certainly leading with students. Those are some of the major takeaways I know I got. And so with this being our close here, I just want to mention just a couple of final remarks here. So just many thanks to our speakers and our attendees. Just want to put another reminder. I know we had several questions coming in about will there be access to the slides. As I mentioned, for those of you that might have joined a little late, we will be posting a recording of this webinar where you can see all of the slides again, in addition to this Q&A. So you will receive a link to that in a follow-up email tomorrow. And I'll just say this as well, please feel free if you need any additional information to reach out to me. Posted my email address here, amaxwell@secondnature.org. You can feel free to contact me there, and I can get you resources or information in connection to this webinar. But many thanks again to all of you, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Stay safe.